The most bizarre deaths in the ancient world. Hey guys, welcome to our historical clarification channel, and in today's unmissable video, we're going to see the most bizarre deaths in the ancient world. We'll look in detail at the strangest and most bizarre deaths in antiquity. I think you will be shocked to learn about horrible punishments, such as being forced to drink molten gold, and absurd accidents, such as an eagle accidentally killing one of the world's greatest playwrights. The ancient world was a dangerous place, full of bloody battles, authoritarian rulers, and dangerous wild animals. It was also a time of discovery, when philosophers and scientists were still learning how the world worked through trial and error. And some of those mistakes were deadly. We will now look at a list of some of the strangest deaths in ancient Greece, Rome, and the rest of the classical world. In some cases, these strange deaths were the result of bad luck, and in others, bad judgment, like the king who poisoned himself with mercury trying to live forever, or the philosopher who jumped into a volcano to prove he was a god. From being crushed by an elephant to being suffocated by clothing, many notable figures from the ancient world died in very strange ways, and in some cases, bizarre things continued to happen to parts of their bodies after they died as well. Although all of these stories were recorded, they were written by contemporaries and biographers who may have exaggerated the representations for different reasons. Escalus was killed by a falling turtle. Called the father of tragedy, Escalus is widely considered one of the greatest playwrights in history. According to the writer Valerius Maximus, in 458 BC, the playwright was killed when an eagle mistook his bald head for a rock and dropped a turtle on him. Pliny later suggested that Escalus was outdoors at the time of his death because he had received a prophecy that he would be killed by a falling object and was afraid to enter his house, but in fact he merely cooperated with the prophecy. Mithridates was covered in milk and honey, consumed by insects. Mithridates was a young Persian soldier in the army of King Artaxerxes II. According to Plutarch, in 401 BC, Mithridates killed Artaxerxes' rival, his brother Cyrus, in a bizarre accident. Of course, Artaxerxes took credit for killing the mighty Cyrus himself, so when Mithridates got drunk and told everyone the real story, the enraged king sentenced him to death by scaphism. What is scaphism? The Greek historian Plutarch explained that the prisoner would be trapped between two hollow logs or in a rowboat. Then they would douse him with a mixture of milk and honey, pouring it not just into his mouth, but all over his face. They then kept their face continually turned towards the sun, and it was completely covered and hidden by the flies that landed on it. And inside the boat, unable to move, the condemned man did all his needs. Creeping things and worms sprouted from the corruption and rot of the excrement. And these entered his bowels, his body was consumed. When people found him, he was already dead, and the boat was taken out of the water. And they found their flesh being devoured, and swarms of such disgusting creatures attacking their entrails. Mithridates survived for 17 days, covered in milk, honey, and his own feces, before dying from a combination of dehydration, starvation, and septic shock. Milo of Croton was trapped in a tree and devoured by wolves. Milo of Croton was a fighter from the 6th century BC, famous for his feats of strength. It was said that he consumed 20 kilos of meat, 20 kilos of bread, and 18 liters of wine per day, and several sources suggest that he owed his success in wrestling to eating roosters' gizzards. One legend claims that when Milo was a child, he became so strong by carrying a newborn calf on his shoulders and then repeating this act daily as the calf grew, until he became a full-sized bull. Unfortunately, Milo's great strength would be his undoing. According to historians Strabo and Pausanias, Milo was walking in the forest when he came across a tree trunk that had been split in two. He inserted his hands into the crack to prove that he could tear the tree in half, but his hands got stuck, and while he was trapped there, he was devoured by a pack of wolves. Marcus Licinius Crassus drank a chalice of molten gold. Marcus Licinius Crassus was a Roman general and politician who was considered one of the richest men in all of human history. He crushed the slave revolt led by Spartacus and was a member of the first triumvirate alongside his ally Julius Caesar and rival Pompey. He was also notorious for a range of crimes, from shadowy real estate frauds to arson and corruption of a Vestal virgin. After losing to the Parthians at the Battle of Carrhae in 53 BC, Crassus was forced to drink a cup of molten gold, symbolizing his great wealth. Another more likely, although less exciting, version says that molten gold was poured into his mouth after he had already died. But this was not the end of Crassus's indignities. That according to Plutarch, after Crassus' death he was beheaded and his head was used as a prop in a production of Euripides' play The Bacchae, where an actor lifted his head and made him sing a song. Hypatia was skinned alive by seashells. Hypatia of Alexandria was a Greek mathematician, astronomer, and philosopher, head of the Neoplatonic school in Alexandria. In her time, she was widely respected and was later elevated as a feminist progenitor. Unfortunately, Hypatia lived at a time when the Roman governor Orestes was quarreling with the Christian bishop Cyril of Alexandria. Rumors spread that Hypatia was encouraging Orestes in his persecution of the city's Christians and Jews. An angry mob of Christians kidnapped her and took her to a church, where they stripped her of her clothes and tore her flesh with sharp oyster shells and beat her with tiles. An alternative account of her death by the Christian John of Nicaea admits that a mob of Christians kidnapped Hypatia, tore her clothes, and dragged her to her death, but shows considerably less sympathy for the pagan woman who deceived the townspeople and the governor through your enchantments. Chrysippus died laughing. Today's Stoics have a reputation for being quite stoic, but that doesn't mean they didn't have a sense of humor. The Stoic philosopher Chrysippus is believed to have laughed himself to death at his own joke in 206 BC. According to biographer Diogenes Laertio, 73-year-old Chrysippus saw a donkey eating figs and joked, "Now give the donkey a sip of pure wine to wash the figs." Then he laughed and didn't stop until he died. Heraclitus was buried in manure and eaten by dogs. The 6th century BC philosopher Heraclitus was a bitter misanthrope who ridiculed Hesiod and Pythagoras as ignorant, and said that Homer deserved to be beaten. He hated his fellow Ephesians so much that he finally abandoned society altogether. According to biographer Diogenes Laertio, finally he became a hated one of his kind and wandered the mountains, making his diet of grass and herbs. Perhaps Heraclitus was so angry because he suffered from dropsy, a painful swelling of the limbs. In an attempt to cure his dropsy, Heraclitus is said to have buried himself in cow dung, hoping that the moist humors that tormented him would be attracted by the heat of the dung. In some versions of this story, the philosopher suffocated in the heat of the dung. However, according to the historian Neiths of Cyzicus, after covering himself in dung, Heraclitus was devoured by hungry dogs. You'll know what really happened. Zeuxis died laughing after painting a gag. 3 centuries before Chrysippus laughed the last time, the ancient Greek painter Zeuxis suffered the same fate. Although none of his paintings remain today, Zeuxis is said to have been one of the greatest painters of his time, so skilled that birds descended from the sky to try and eat the grapes in his paintings. But when a very ugly old woman commissioned Zeuxis to paint a portrait of the beautiful goddess Aphrodite using her as a model, the resulting painting was so absurd that Zeuxis couldn't help himself and began laughing, without stopping until he died. Draco was suffocated under a pile of clothes. Draco was the first lawgiver of Athens, who replaced the prevailing informal and oral legal system with a formal written code to be applied in court. These laws were extremely strict, giving rise to the word draconian. Very little is known about Draco's personal life, although there is an apocryphal story that he died in a theater when his fans threw so many hats and cloaks at him that he was buried underneath them all and suffocated to death. Imp Pedicles jumped into a volcano. By all accounts, the philosopher Imp Pedicles of the 5th century BC. He had an impressive intellect. He was a dazzling speaker, a penetrating philosopher, and a brilliant scientist. Not content with all this acclaim, however, Empedocles boasted that he had magical powers, including the ability to cure disease, stop aging, and control the weather. According to biographer Diogenes Laertius, Empedocles decided to gamble on what he was talking about, jumping into the active volcano of Mount Etna to convince his followers that he had become an immortal god and ascended to Olympus. The philosopher expected his body to be completely consumed, but the volcano spat one of his sandals back, exposing him as a man and not a god. Qin Shi Huang got mercury poisoning while searching for an elixir of life. Qin Shi Huang was the first emperor of the Qin dynasty, ruling all of newly unified China from 220 to 210 BC. During his short reign, he established China as an empire, built the Great Wall of China, built a national highway system, and commissioned the Terracotta Army, and all while surviving 3 assassination attempts. As he grew older, Qin Shi Huang became obsessed with finding the elixir of life that would grant him immortality. He launched increasingly strange schemes to find this elixir, including sending ships full of hundreds of young men and women in search of a 1,000-year-old wizard on a mystical island. Legend has it that these reluctant explorers were the first to colonize Japan. Finally, Qin Shi Huang died from ingesting mercury pills that the court doctors assured him would make him live forever. Philetas de Cos died of hunger while studying. Philetas of Cos was the prototype of the academic, an eccentric and worried man who was so thin and frail that he was said to have to keep weights in his shoes to keep from flying. He was a poet and scholar obsessed with the study of words and their meanings. The 2nd century Greek author Athenæus of Naucratis claimed that Philetas became so obsessed with studying rhetoric and grammar that he stopped sleeping and eating until he died of hunger, although it is more likely that he suffered from a debilitating illness. Pyrrhus of Epirus was killed by an old woman with a tile. Pyrrhus of Epirus was a Greek general and statesman widely considered one of the greatest military commanders of the ancient world, in the company of his second cousin Alexander the Great. For all his great glory, however, Pyrrhus came to a rather inglorious end, when during a battle in the city of Argos, an old lady watching the fight from a rooftop saw Pyrrhus in combat with her son below and dropped a tile on the roof. Pyrrhus' head, stunning him and allowing the Agios soldier to finish him off in a hurry. He lives, however, in the phrase Pyrrhic victory or Pyrrhic victory is an expression used to refer to a victory obtained at a high price, potentially causing irreparable damage. Eleazar Averin was crushed to death by a war elephant. A Jewish soldier who fought in the Maccabean revolt against the Seleucid Empire, Eleazar Averin is mainly remembered today for the way he died. According to 1 Maccabees, during the Battle of Beth Zechariah in 162 BC, Eleazar spotted a war elephant that he believed was carrying the enemy king Antiochus V. He heroically ran underneath the war elephant and thrust a spear into its belly, killing the elephant and himself as the dead elephant immediately fainted and crushed him to death. Eleazar's final act was a popular subject for artists in the Middle Ages. His voluntary self-sacrifice was said to prefigure the crucifixion of Jesus, and the manner of this sacrifice was a great opportunity to paint an elephant. Of course, most medieval painters had never seen an elephant in real life. So, what did you think of today's video? Did you already know this fascinating story of the most bizarre deaths in the ancient world? What were the points that caught your attention the most? Let us know your thoughts on this topic, as we would love to read and respond to your comments below. And if you liked this video and don't want to miss any of the other intriguing videos we post every week, just subscribe to our channel and click the bell to receive all notifications. And if you want to enjoy it and learn a little more, be sure to click on one of these videos that we are suggesting for you. Until the next video.